Hello and welcome to the last day of the 14th edition of Dialogues International LGBTQIA Film and Video Festival 2020. Today we are up for a very important conversation. Um, the title of this panel is Bursting the Bubble, Understanding Queer Film Programming Practices from Non-Metro India. You see, LGBT film festivals curate programs that are expected to cater to queer identity politics and often tend to conform to normative cinematic standards of mainstream film festivals. Since programmers are crucial to this process, the present panel proposes to speak to certain curatorial approaches to that intersection of cinema and identity politics, from both the festival circuit and sometimes beyond, as we will see today, to understand how they use traditional and queer programming strategies to negotiate between various stakeholders that are involved or that are situated within certain social contexts. The conversation proposes to uncover how they are able to program both mainstream films as well as critical films with underrepresented themes, and what are some of this thinking that goes behind presenting them. Also, what are some of the consequences of such decisions that are taken. The panel will also seek to explore certain contexts beyond the urban elite metro city spaces that have the potential to affect the way a queer film screening or a queer film festival can promote itself and its politics to the societies in which it is located. So, to join us in this very important and what we felt as a relevant panel, a relevant conversation, uh, we have our panelists Shankar Dev Chaudhary from Assam, who stays and lives and works in Guwahati. But Shankar will be joining us from live from this station in Calcutta. He has just arrived, and we're very excited to have him amidst us. And and we have Rajshri from Kerala. Um, but I would like to introduce to you first our very exciting and eminent moderator, Abhijit Mukul Kishore, uh, who is a filmmaker and a cinematographer based in Mumbai, and who works in documentary films and interdisciplinary moving image practices, often collaborating with visual artists on video and other film based artworks. He is also involved in cinema pedagogy as a lecturer and curator of film programs. Kishore studied cinematography at the Film and Television Institute of India in Pune and holds a degree in history from the Hindu College, University of Delhi. His works have shown at Documenta 14 at Athens, Chicago Architecture Biennale, Dhaka Art Summit, in addition to several film festivals, academic and cultural spaces. Shankar um, has been part of or is the founder of Glow, a social space, which is a queer affirmative space in Guwahati, and who for the past decade or more has been hosting queer screenings, making them available to diverse group of people from remote Northeast states, and also by ensuring that they become accessible by using technological interventions on his own accord. Rajshri is a queer rights activist associated with Kerala, an LGBTQIA organization in Kerala, as board member since 2016. She works as communications officer at the India Foundation for the Arts. Prior to joining the IFA, Rajshri worked as deputy program manager of the Performing Arts Department and co-curricular program at Ashoka University. So, over to you, Mukul.
Hi, thank you all. Thanks, Onindo, for the introduction. I'd like to thank all of you, the entire team at Dialogues, Goethe Institute, Sharmishta, and always a pleasure to be part of this festival. It's my second time around. I've attended earlier, as an audience member many years ago, and it's just lovely the kind of vibrance there is, the variety there is in the discourse, around queerness, identity, gender, and cinema. And I'm really privileged, to be part of not one but two discussions today. The first one with Shankardev and Rajeshri this afternoon on a lovely early winter afternoon. We're all in different parts of the country, and it's good to break the boundaries of geography. Well, that's I'm trying to look at the better side of COVID, and how we can get together. And the program itself goes out way beyond the confines of one theater, which has its own intimacy. I agree, but yeah, this is in some ways different and in some ways better. So just some of my own reflections, on queer cinema and queer programming, where having grown up in Delhi, where culture is offered not only on a platter, but sometimes, almost by force, by a drip that's connected directly to, your veins. And it's all free from the various government ministries or cultural organizations and so on. And I pretty much grew up with that kind of privilege. And I remember that in the early 1990s, the Directorate of Film Festivals, Government of India, had organized its first and perhaps only queer film festival, which was held at the major City Food Auditorium in Delhi. And it was then called the Gay and Lesbian Film Festival. I was most impressed by it. Unfortunately, I was not able to attend it because I was not in the city at that point of time. But that was a big beginning. Many other festivals have since started and have become, a regular feature in the big cities of Bombay with its different festivals, with Bangalore, with the Bangalore Queer Film Festival, and every city, and of course, not to forget Dialogues, which is the oldest and in its 14th edition this year. So much power to you all. But what becomes interesting is what really happens in the non-metros. And we're privileged that we have Rajeshi today, who's currently working in Bangalore, but works in Kerala, part of this organization in Kerala, and at present in Trivandrum. And Shankar Dev in Assam, and at present in Calcutta, all thanks to COVID. And what really happens, what are the challenges, and what are the kind of narratives, and what are the kind of specific concerns that emerge out of being in these places. So I'd like to bring on both Rajeshri and Shankar, and we will alternate between them. So Rajeshri, welcome very much, to this afternoon session. Will you unmute yourself, please?
Sure.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Good to see you.
Thanks.
And so you studied in Delhi and then in Ashoka University, and at Kalakshetra before that, learning Bharatanatyam. So you have a long history, with the performing arts, and now, with India Foundation for the Arts. And tell me about your involvement with, Querela. Tell me about the organization itself and the
Sure.
festival that you all organized last year in 2019 called QLOI.
Correct. Yeah.
So it would be interesting to know, one, about the organization, your association with them, and then about this event which happened last year.
All right. Okay. So I would like to start by thanking Mukul, Anindya, and all other organizers for inviting me to speak on this panel. I would also like to congratulate all of you, because it's really heartening to see that you're continuing to organize dialogues given the current situation. Um, Okay, so I'll begin with a brief background into our work at Kerala and how we arrived at the decision to organizing our own short film and documentary film festival last year. Okay, so Kerala is a community-based organization for the LGBTQIA plus persons in Kerala, which was officially registered in 2016. I came on board after that. So our aim has always been to organizing awareness campaigns, engaging with stakeholders to promote queer inclusive healthcare services, educational curriculum, workplace policies, and local self-governance. Now, there is a state transgender policy where transgender people are recognized before the law. And as you know, the section 377 was scrapped 2 years ago. But our legal, social, and medical and the medical systems are so broken that most of the work we do is crisis intervention, really. Many of us are victimized by the healthcare system and are struggling with domestic violence and other workplace harassment. So, so when the founder of the organization Querela, initially brought up the idea of organizing a short film and documentary film festival, some of us, at least on the board, were not convinced. We were not sure about spending our limited resources on a film festival. We thought that that is something that the educational institutions or film clubs in the state must do. But from our conversations with other queer people and allies, we understood that in the long term, it is important for queer rights organizations to work towards creating a change in social attitudes. And film festivals are one of the important ways, especially to reach the youth. Historically, the film festivals such as the International Film Festival of Kerala and International Documentary and Short Film Festival of Kerala, which I grew up watching, in fact, were important channels in which queer issues were brought into the public's attention. So we felt that there was a need to build on that. At the same time, I would say that the birth of Women in Cinema Collective, you must have heard of the WCC, which was formed in Kerala after an incident of sexual assault against a leading female actor, allegedly orchestrated by a powerful male actor, was an inspiration, really. For the first time, there was an official representative body to protest misogyny in Malayalam film industry. So that's when we decided to collaborate with them and organize Culoid. Our festival was called Culoid, a one-day short film and documentary film festival, for mainly two reasons, as I mentioned before, for its transformational potential, right? And to basically hold hands with WCC and queer the conversation that they had already initiated in mainstream Malayali society. So yeah, that's the background. I'll speak more about the festival later, I think. There are questions.
I forgot I need to have Shankardev be visible. So Shankar, if you could please come online and, let's see you, and also let's hear about your concerns, which are very specific and different. I mean, you're coming from a different place, a different context, and a different milieu. And your entry point into this whole discourse is different, So, yeah, nice to see you on screen. Finally, I should have done this earlier. So,
thank you so much, Mukul. And at the outset, I'd like to thank the entire Dialogues team to sort of have me on. And of course, it's only quite pertinent in the sense that Dialogues being the oldest film festival, they have, I think, gone beyond themselves to include everybody in it. And mine is a completely personal journey, so to speak. I am part of, I started something called Glow. It's gone on to be the Glow social space back in 2009. And this is purely on a basis that to have a space, which was my home initially, for people to interact socially, and especially for people in the LGBTQIA spectrum where they did not have to express themselves and be themselves. Something called the open house sessions, which was almost every Saturday. I mean, we were very aggressive about it, and we kept it open for everybody. And we were not on social media as such. I mean, we didn't have any Facebook pages or any Instagram accounts to start off with. It was mainly by word of mouth. And I think that worked well because very fact that one could take the step to come over to someone's house to expose themselves in a way be known socially itself is the first step for others. So I felt that, it was just a space for incubation for people to come on and meet other people. and strictly on a very social kind of a nature, so that one feels empowered to see that, okay, you're walking into a room full of strangers, and yet they are like you in so many respects. So this is how we started, and well, the films that actually I started screening from 2013 onwards was another journey by itself. I mean, I remember that I was looking for LGBTQI films of sorts for my own collection, and I, of course, fortunately, I stumbled across a very dear friend of mine, Manoj Harpalani, who's now overseas, and he had this entire, I think, 80 GB collection of films, and I thought that I'll just put this as my personal collection. But while I was seeing the films, I thought that why don't I share this with other people? And it would be selfish for me to just keep it for myself and enjoy it. And that was when I started looking for projectors, and I didn't have any what to speak of. And I remember one of my friends, he in fact loaned me a projector, and he had it in his own personal house, and he was part of the Glow group. And I remember every fortnight we used to screen films. And he used to get his projector over, and we used to screen it on the wall of my house. I mean, that was how we started. And we used to tell people over WhatsApp group. So we had a Globe WhatsApp group, and we used to tell people beforehand that this is the kind of films that we have, and this is the kind of films we plan to screen. And that is how we started. Very rudimentary, very homegrown, very hands-on. We didn't have a projector. And then this very friend of mine, I think probably he got fed up of loaning his projector every fortnight. He actually bought me a projector. He actually donated a projector for us. And yeah. So that's how we started film screenings, and I think it added a huge dimension to, without the vocal articulation. I think cinema is such a strong media to sort of have your stories played out. It's just that it's amazing. I mean, the kind of impact that it can have on people, and to see that even for a second or even for a moment, what you put out on screen. So the experience is not just your own personal experience, but the experience is so many others. So much so that it's been shared on the silver screen to be shared and seen.
Okay, I think I'm.
So this was how we started, and we started from 2013, and I can't see it. So.
Yeah.
Now I can hear you. Yes.
Okay. No, your connection was lagging for me. I'm not sure it was like that for everybody.
Yes.
But anyway, we'll go into the details of our, the two different programs. But what I wanted to start with, is some of the films that both Shankar and Rajeshri, some of the first so-called queer films or queer themed films that you saw and were influenced by, that you found important, that you were moved by, and so on. So before we get into the specifics of the kind of work that you both have been doing, I'd just like to talk about what some of those films were. So maybe because Shankar, you're on, let's start with you. Some 2 or 3 off the top of your head, and then Rajeshri.
Yeah, I mean, the films that impacted me was something called, one called was The Cut Sleeve Boys. It was a 2007 film directed by Ray Young. It was a British film, but of the Asian community. This was one that I really enjoyed screening. And do I need to go on with the list, or do I need to talk about however you want?
Just give us a couple of titles,
And of course I showed something. There's a famous film called The Stranger by the Lake. It's a 2013 film by Alain Giraudy, I think. Yes, that was the name. And I think this impacted the entire community. In fact, I had to show this film over a number of times because of the popularity of it. I think it connected on many levels, and another movie that was that I personally enjoyed was something called Hell Bent. It was actually around It was a 2004 film actually, and it was around Halloween. And we always feel that Halloween is a very part of our nature, because Halloween is all about the otherworldly stuff that is there. And so these are to encapsulate it very briefly, these are the kind of films that you could almost see the range of films. It is basically comedy, then very serious and horror as well. So these are the films that I sort of screened within the years that I had. Yes, that's right.
Thanks, Shankadev. Rajesh, can you come on, please? And with your films. So, Mike, please, you're muted.
Yeah, there are two films. One is Lawrence Anyways by Xavier Dolan, 2012 film, I think.
I loved
it. I remember watching it as a young college student, and I was I was really impressed by that film. I think there's no better film that talks about gender. Like, it's just a beautiful film. And the second one is it's actually a film which we screened at curate. It's called Oruvanukku Oruthi. It's a Tamil film by somebody called Vimal S. It's a short film. I think it's one of those rarest films that talks about bisexuality. I think it's beautiful. You should watch it. It was on YouTube. I think the director took it down a few months ago.
Yeah, no, it's for moments like this that festivals become important.
Yeah.
Or limited screenings or whatever, they become important, because otherwise you never get to see these.
Correct.
Break my head against people who say we never get to see your work on Netflix or on television. I'm like, you will never get to see my work on Netflix anyway, because the whole environment is very different.
Correct.
And the whole that entire ecosphere is completely different. So and it just so happens that we are all, I guess, in our own spaces, in our own places, or even if we are in different parts of the same city, it's almost as if different people are at different moments in the history of the queer movement.
True.
Or with regard to our own personal histories and contexts, and of course, I guess then access to cinema, queer or otherwise, and so on. And cinema then becomes important, of course, like you said, that we may be, at different, different places within India might find themselves at different points in this history now, but times have changed over the last so many years. Very, very concerted work by all the activists and everybody, and Bureau Film Festivals are no small part of that entire process. 377 has gone, but the trans bill has been passed, as you said. So that's another challenge that you keep going in circles. And one challenge leads to another. And in all this, the medium of cinema in its various forms, whether it's something that you use to reflect, something that informs you, something that agitates you, something that reassures you, something that builds solidarities, and I think most importantly, something that entertains you,
Because absolutely, yes.
I think
it should be entertaining at the end of it. Yes.
That's right. I think at some level, especially if I'm a documentary filmmaker, and in the documentary circuit or in the activist circuit, there'll be some of us who will tend to dismiss the entertainment film, and I feel that those
absolutely
have a far greater reach and potential. Yes, many of them have problems. But then it's a discussion that we're all part of, and because they have problems, it leads us to talk, and so on, and bring things out into the open. So, Rajesh, tell me, about the event itself. It was a one-day event which happened at the Kerala Museum at Kochi, right?
It happened at the Museum of Kerala History. It's one of the oldest arts and history museums in Cochin, actually. Yeah.
Okay. At this point, I need to remind the audience that the question and answer box is open. If you have direct questions to any of us, please start typing and we'll take them as when the time comes. Yeah. So please continue, Rajeshri.
Sure. So Culoid happened in 2019, July 2019, as I said, in Museum of Kerala History. After my presentation, I think I'll show some pictures from the event. Yeah, so it's a small and intimate space, basically, but it's, again, I think it's important because it happened at a public place, right? It happened at a public place where everybody, anyone could just walk in. That was a risk that we took, but I think, I mean, luckily nothing happened. Like all went well. And apart from the film screenings, there was also a meet the directors session with some of the directors whose film some of the directors whose films were shown at the festival, and a panel discussion about masculinities. I mean, about the curatorial process, I would say that our focus were on films made by queer filmmakers themselves. So most of the films shown at the festival, except one or two, were made by queer people, and at the discussion that followed, had them speaking about how the art of filmmaking enabled them to assert their queer identities, and they also spoke about the challenges they face as queer people in the film industry. Okay, and I think it's important to speak of the responses we received as well, right? So I remember, I mean, we had screened a film, a documentary Malayalam, I mean, a Malayalam documentary film called Ennodappam by this journalist named Abhijit, P. Abhijit. I think you should watch it. I mean, this film spoke not just about the journeys of trans people, but also of journeys that their families, both biological and chosen families, embarked alongside them. So, I mean, it was very different, and we received a lot of good responses for that film, but in particular, because I think Malayalam film, I mean, it happened in Kerala, so most people spoke Malayalam, and they understood that film better than everything else, I think. So one of the most heartwarming and memorable reaction was from a young mother who has young children and wanted to know how they can be inclusive and sensitize their children from a young age to become decent adults. And the best part is, before the filmmaker or we, the organizers, could respond, another young mother who has been an ally of the LGBTQIA+ movement in Kerala spoke about how she has been sensitizing her young children, you know. After which a lesbian woman got up, I mean, a lesbian woman who has a young child got up and spoke about how she came out of her experience of coming out to her child, who now accepts her and her partner. So it was really good to see that. To have allies speak to each other and queer people, you know, with different experiences, speak up. They felt safe there. So that was really, I mean, that was really good.
Yeah, no, wonderful to hear this, Rajshri. Of course, yeah, I mean, if you look at the entire history of the queer movement and the movement of, I guess, the history of queer film festivals, the similar stories, and of course, the tone changes because this is 2020, you know, and the discourse itself has moved on, and it has been empowering and very positive, you know, and so on. Shankar, I'd like you to come on, and the entire, I guess, the kind of solidarities that build over cinema, over film viewing, and you know everything. So tell me about one, the entire audience profile. You know, of where you are, who were you taking these films to, and I think it's very important to point out that you were sourcing these films and you taught yourself how to subtitle them, you know. So whatever language the film were in, you subtitle them into English so people would be able to follow the dialogue and catch the accents, because accents are difficult. And you see more and more programming online, and even otherwise, sometimes even theatrically, English films have English subtitles, and I myself find that very, very useful because I can't catch accents, you know, and I forget characters' names. So that entire process, and I've seen your list, it's very, very impressive. And hundreds of films that you have sat and subtitled by yourself, you know, and being not being a film person, you know, having taught yourself how to do that, I think is very remarkable. So just, you know, tell us about that, you know, and firstly, where this is happening, and what the audience profile is, and what kind of discussions happened afterwards.
Yeah, spot on, Mukul. I mean, the way you said that everything had to be hands-on, and I wasn't trained, you know, accordingly like software trained to sort of have these subtitles on. Well, my audience range was actually mostly from Guwahati. That was there, from my own hometown. And as the word spread, it went on from people from Meghalaya and Manipur. And as far as Mizoram, people used to come visiting. And since we used to put it out, as I said earlier, on WhatsApp groups about our film screenings and the timings, so we used to put it up about a week before. So people, at least, if they come visiting to Guwahati, they could come over and join us in our films and in our film screenings. And secondly, yes, I mean, to sort of enhance the entire movie experience and for a deeper understanding of the nuanced, particularly the humor of the cinema that is being shown, because I usually started off with showing cinemas with a lighter theme, so to speak, a bit of with a comic element in it, sort of to introduce the more heavier, more serious elements into the later films that I showed. And through this, I felt that I mean, I learned this overseas in the sense that I remember I was seeing French program over TV in France, and they had these French programs but subtitled in French. And this is when I thought that because in my earlier movies, when I showed it when I began, this was without any subtitling, and people sort of missed out on the humor. People missed out because of different accents. Probably it was British cinema or American cinema, and obviously accents are very, very different from what our ears are trained to. And this is when I thought that probably I would like to subtitle the movie as well, what has been said. So of course, some of the subtitles, I could find it on the web. I mean, I could find it on the web pages and download those subtitles and put it into the movies itself. But there were some movies where I could not find, because as you could understand, the LGBTQI movies that are there, as I think you mentioned it. I mean, you may not find it in popular mainstreams, things like Netflix or whatever, and it's rather obscure. Some of them are indie films, and especially the independent films did not have the subtitling that it required. And I had to download this software and actually listen to the movie for second, and actually over and over again, and put them in subtitles. I mean, even for me, I wasn't trained to sort of be what should I say? Be accustomed to the accent, and I had to do this for second, and you have to actually coordinate it in a way that does not overlap the voice. I'm quite sure you being a documentarian and trained in filmmaking, you'd know that. And this is completely. I mean, I learned it by myself, and this is how and it was an arduous process. It was extremely tedious, extremely long. I mean, but it was worth it at the end of it. And I think the entire movie-going experience was enhanced because of that. Yes, that was one of it. Yes.
So I guess what was the largest group that you all had at the screenings?
Oh, I mean, we've had groups as large as 20 to 25 people on one screening. And we've had, in fact, I was being encouraged by some of my own friends. He said, and we had as low as even 2 or 3 people. To be very honest with you. And I was told this when I was disappointed, perhaps, to carry on with the film. Is it worth it? But there was a friend of mine who was an ally and a very close friend. He says, no, Shankar, you must do it even if there's nobody. You must keep it up, because it is a program that you have, and to inculcate the program will take time. And even if there's nobody, you should screen it. And yeah,
completely agree. And my point of asking was not, at all to stress on the numbers, but just to get a sense, because you said people were coming from everywhere.
Yes, they were.
To your program, and because even if, like you said, if there are 2 people watching, or if it's a small group, or whatever the group size may be, I mean, like there is in, I guess, any classroom or any film event, there. If there are 4 people who take something back, or if there are 2 people who take something back, that's an important audience. That's really
absolutely, Mukul. You're completely correct on this. It's how you take back the experience, and the fact that the experience stays with you for a while. And as I earlier mentioned, and you'd agree with me, that film is such a strong form of articulation, and the experiences that you've lived you could see it on that silver screen even for a small moment, and that is a lived experience. That is something that you take away, and it stays with you. Yes, that's right.
Absolutely. I mean, you know, like it is with film, like it is with music, that it opens up this entire world for you where
Yes, yes.
you'll have a sense of empathy and, you know, looking at other people's lives or having a sense of identification or a sense of, or a sense of, I guess, revelation that this world is possible, you know?
Yes, and Mukul, you'd also agree with the fact that it is also very empowering at the end of it,
Absolutely.
and how, like you said, the lived experience and the empathy. These are paths to one's own empowerment and to the sense of self, which brings about, and that sense of self and the confidence of who you are and what you emanate thereof and how you describe yourselves to the others is very, very important. And I think films is an intrinsic part of that.
Yeah, yeah. Rajeshri, there are two questions. One, what was the movie that you talked about? I guess somebody is looking for the title for that. So if you could at some point type that into the Q&A box later, and you're mute again. You're mute. Please start your mic. And yeah, usual problem. And yeah, you have some photographs from Q.
Yes, yes, yes. Dana, can we go through the slides?
It would be important to, you know, maybe get a sense of, yeah. So tell us about this.
These are the films that we showed, the posters of the film. Yeah, this film Nyan Sanjo is about a trans man. It's his journey. Yeah, these are the posters. Yeah, some pictures from the screening, and yeah, the more than 100 people attended our screening actually from the panel discussions. Yeah.
Yeah.
It was an intimate space, but a lot of people came for the festival.
No, it looks like a lovely space, and also you cannot do this enough. Whatever you do, you know, there's always an audience. You know, there's
Yeah.
always an audience, and I say that as a programmer, you know, who's been organizing
Correct.
screenings in the city of Bombay for the last 8 years or so. You know? And
Like Shankar said, we wanted to do it whether we had an audience or not. That was not a concern for us.
Yes,
Yeah.
that's right. Yes, that's
Yeah.
true. Yes, and since mine was more over the years and over the weeks, it was a constant effort, and this was done under the confines of my home. Of course, now we have a dedicated space altogether with the screen and with the projector and all of
Oh.
it, and all the paraphernalia that needs to sort of screen a film. So now, of course, I feel that we can cater to larger audiences, and probably and as of 2021, hopefully I should start the screenings again. And earlier we used to have it on Saturday evenings, so that was a little difficult for a lot of people to come. So I'm thinking probably later on I might just start off with Sunday afternoons as well. So that'll give accessibility to more people.
what were some of the panel discussions, Rajeshri, you know, at QLOI?
Yeah, there was a discussion about masculinities, and there was a meet the director session, and we had queer people working in the film industry to come and speak about their challenges. For instance, a makeup artist, a celebrity makeup artist, spoke about the harassment and bullying they face on a daily basis, and how there are no redressal mechanisms available, and non-availability of gender-neutral washrooms, and discrimination in pay even in the film industry. And she basically, because there were people from WCC who work in mainstream films, in Malayalam films, she was basically speaking to them to talk about how they should be more inclusive in their posh rules and all of that.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, that was the conversation that over, and how queer people must be given a chance in the film industry as well. Than just yeah.
I think it's if let's say if we look at the mainstream Hindi film industry in Bollywood, I think queer people have a fair representation, you know, in the various departments. But then that's the mainstream. You know, that's the mainstream, and it's based in Bombay, where the discourse is a little different. you know.
Hmm.
Which is not to say that everything is hunky-dory and people do not feel discrimination or being made fun of and so on.
But
Despite,
are they out? These queer people, I mean, are they, I mean, living the truths at the workplace? Are they doing that?
absolutely, I mean, many of them across the spectrum. Of course, the cliche used to be the dress man or the makeup man, you know, and some of whom were trans women. So trans person, you know, so I guess the term goes dress man or makeup man, but you know, a lot of those are trans women. But now you see more and more and more across the spectrum that people are out. You know, people are really out. Maybe in the work.
No, no, I feel,
Yeah,
yeah, what I was saying is that they are out there. They have always been there. But the problem is they are not, their issues are not addressed properly. There are no redressal mechanisms. I think that's the case in Bollywood too. I
yeah.
don't think it's the
No,
posh policies there. I mean, I don't think the work conditions are conducive to including them, you know. That's what I meant.
yeah.
That's what they meant to.
The thing is that yeah, toilets is I think a very small part of the problem here.
Of course it is.
It's,
Yeah.
it's you know it's not just gender neutral toilets. I mean you'll be lucky if you have women's toilets on
Hmm.
you know on
Correct.
location or in a studio and so on. And this is something that we've read from accounts of female actors, you know, especially older ones. You know, like there's the a long interview with Wahida Rahman done by Nasreen Munni Kabir, which is published into a book, and she says we never had any toilets. So for the entire day, you did not go to the loo and you're dancing, you're performing, you're doing all kinds of things, you're running around, but you can't go to the toilet. But when you look at the whole question of queer people in the film industry, it is a very, very macho space. It's a very,
Yeah.
Absolutely,
Yes.
absolutely.
and despite the fact that, you know, they may be openly queer or rumored queer or apparently queer film directors and producers, it still remains a macho space, and which is not to say that queer people are not macho. You know, queer people can be as macho as anybody else, and it's among the reasons why I chose not to work in Bollywood. I'm trained as a camera person, you know, and it's one of the reasons where I could not deal with one, that misogyny and that homophobia, which you'd have to deal with every day. It's like the kind of aggression that if I
Yeah.
chose to live in Delhi, the kind of aggression that you'd have to deal with on a daily basis is the kind of aggression which means you always have your defenses up and you spend a lot of energy.
Absolutely, absolutely.
It's the reality of a lot of queer people, especially trans people, you know,
Yes.
that you have to have that wall up, you have to be abrasive to just get by, you know, on a day to day in your day to day life and so on. But it's a choice that I made. So yeah, I mean those it's an ongoing discussion, and I think it's still at an early stage, but very different from the time when I entered the industry, which is about 25 years ago or so, you know. So yeah, I mean that's
But Mukul, would you agree that Bollywood is still a very homophobic institution? I mean, if you actually look at it even today, like you talked about how masculinity and toxic version of masculinity and even misogyny, like how Rajesh had said, are being portrayed in mainstream cinema, which affects the whole lot of people who go for those kinds of cinema. What would you think?
uh,
Or do you think it has changed completely?
not completely. I mean, it's easier now. It's easier now. I don't think there'll
It's
be.
still not talked about as much as it wasn't earlier as well, wasn't it?
I mean,
Or isn't it?
also, I think like any other field of work or any other movement or anything else, Bollywood is not a monolith. You know, there are multiple industries within Bollywood, and you know, there's all kinds of grades of film. So, of course, if you're working with a mainstream studio, or you know, if you're working with something which is a lower down the ladder, things are different. And finally, it just depends on who's on the team and what the outlook is, which is not to say that if you're doing a C grade movie, it's impossible to have you know, a sensitive crew. It's just who's on it. I mean, you could be on a very, very major production with very senior filmmakers and producers who could be completely, yeah, part of my friendship, who could be assholes, you know. And yeah, but you could be on any other. So it just depends on where you are and who you're working with. So a choice while working with people also, because you choose your people, you know, to work with, and you choose your groups to work with. It is definitely different 20 years later, you know. So maybe in the mainstream, people won't openly make fun of you, but that undercurrent is always there. It is a very macho space. It really is a very macho space, and so on. Yeah.
And it still doesn't make accommodations for people of the spectrum itself and from the LGBTQI. What you would think?
No,
Or they have to make spaces for themselves?
it's a bit of both. I mean, it's really a bit of both. So it definitely does more than it did before. So I'm not saying it's static. It's not static. There's a
Yeah,
definite,
never is.
yeah,
Yes, that's right.
there's a definite improvement. But yeah, it depends on who you're. So yeah, there's a comment here which is from an anonymous attendee. I guess Bollywood industry is full of toxic masculinity and objectifying the cis women, like the way cis actors and actresses are portrayed and the stories being told with the help of these actors. Yeah, that's true.
I
And
think I absolutely agree with that.
yeah,
And I think Malayalam industry is much better when compared to
Yeah.
the Bollywood or any other Indian state-wide industries, right? Film industries.
is it?
I think it is better. There are good films now. With the formation of WCC, there's an open discussion on misogyny and toxic masculinity.
No, I think
etc.
WCC is a very important organization.
Which is so
Definitely.
relieving, Rajeshri, to hear something like that there's an open discussion of toxic masculinity and misogyny. This is where discussions start, and this is where the limitations around it, and then the changes thereof that comes from it, actually. That's true.
So there's another question from, I don't know if it's the same anonymous person or a different anonymous person, but what might be the areas to work on to improve accessibility of film festival programming? And what could be the impact of online film festivals? Does either of you want to take it?
I think Mukul, you'll be the best to articulate on that, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, it's accessibility of film festival programming. Yeah, there's so much, there's really so much that goes into making a festival or an event, an institution, a space, and I'm talking about physical festivals, funding, whatever it takes. So a lot of the programming that I have done has been based in state institutions like Films Division, Government of India, and a museum, Baroda Jilad in Bombay. So it's housed within that as part of their program. But otherwise, yeah, I mean, it really takes a lot. And then to figure out how much freedom do you have to program, or, what we make of freedom. Let's say, Shankar, if you are screening as part of, your program, which is an informal program, you can say pretty much what you like, including pornography if you wish to, it's a small group and, so on. Rajeshri, if, since you are holding your events again in a controlled kind of environment, there's a certain amount of freedom, and it's great that you had state support on your Huloid in 2019.
Yeah.
But I somehow feel that sometimes restrictions force you to think what is called out of the box. Where
restrictions in the sense?
For me, yes, Mukul, I completely understood that. Yes, restrictions make you think out of the box.
Yeah, what you can and cannot show. Likewise, because films need a censor certificate, what you can and cannot put. Politically, I'm interested in films that subvert, narratives and subvert agendas of filmmaking, to slip in messages that are subversive, that are subliminal, and so on. So there's another layer working of subtext, which then makes, I mean, for me, it makes film viewing more interesting, and it also opens up processes of discussion. Really. So yeah, I mean, you gain some, you lose some, and some of the most powerful films have been made in countries that have the deepest censorship. Now, I'm not supporting censorship in any way. I'm not saying censorship is a good thing, but if certain deeply political and subversive films have come out of places like USSR, or have come out of places like Cuba or Iran, I feel there's something to be gained out of it. I'm not saying censorship is a good thing, and so on. So,
and you're right, Mukul, like how you said that, probably in film festivals, you have to curate the films of a certain sort. And of course, in an intimate space like mine, which is completely personal, I had the freedom to actually choose films, And like you said, I had the liberty to kind of choose the films that I felt was pertinent. And not only that, I had to discuss it with a group of people as to what kind of films they wanted to see. So there was a flexibility. Of course, I couldn't sort of reach out to the kind of audiences that a film festival would perhaps reach out. But yes, in an intimate space, I had the freedom to sort of show the films that I wanted. Yes, that's right.
But what's important in this case, Shankar, is that, and Rajeshri, you will know that, since Kerala was the birthplace and, pretty much the hub of the film society movement.
Yes.
And of course, mirrored in West Bengal, you know.
Mm. Mm.
And it's not at all important that you have to have 1,000 people in the theater, And
Right.
some of the most intimate and important discussions happened, like in the case of classical music, they happened in small baithaks in people's homes and living rooms and so on. So if you have 20 people, I think it's great, because the kind of discussion, intimate discussion that is possible in small groups will not happen when there are.
Correct. Yeah,
Absolutely
yeah.
correct. Absolutely. Because in fact, after the movie was screened, in my experiences of movie screening, there was this strong discussion. It's not just that, it's not clinical. The movie was shown and you go back to where you came from and things like that. It went on even after the movies. It went on over drinks, perhaps. It went on over, associations. We talked about the movie, what we felt was good. And it was happening very organically. It wasn't structured in a way that, okay, we'll discuss about the movies after the movies are over, we'll have that kind of a system. No, it just fell into place in a very natural sort of a way.
Yeah.
Mm.
Okay. So, I mean, I can go
So
on.
my point.
Yes. I think now the smooth flow is coming on between all three of us. I mean, we could have gone on and on, Rajeshri, don't you think?
Yeah, that is.
Go on, please.
Yeah.
Go on.
I mean, our thought was to show films made by queer filmmakers, so that there are stories coming out from us, about us. So I think that was important. I think that's what's missing in many films. Like somebody pointed, there's a comment in the Q&A section from an anonymous attendee. I would like to know what's the opinion of the panelists about the LGBTQIA plus movie making its way into mainstream Bollywood, but most of them aren't objectively good movies. Why aren't they good films? Because there are no queer people involved in the making of the film.
Or even if they are queer people making the films, probably they're playing to the house. Mukul, I think.
Yes. Or they have one or two token people being involved in the filmmaking process.
And half of them are caricatured, like
correct,
what you,
correct.
yes.
No, complicated.
Like men talking about women,
Yeah, no, complicated argument. No, I agree with you that it's important to have voices from within. But this was actually the subject of the talk that I had given at Dialogue a few years ago. I'm forgetting it was 2017 or 18, where what Bollywood was actually able to do, what looked on the surface as a caricature or homophobic, was putting into the mainstream certain ideas that people are queer and queer people are around us, and we see them.
But they're also very funny. They're also very funny. They're clownish, all that kind of stuff.
No, but we have. I think
I don't know. Is it?
No, we have definitely gone beyond that. And I can go on about this for.
I know we could go on about this forever. Yes.
No, but I really think we have gone beyond that, and I'll give you just one example. From there was this film called Bombay Talkies, which was
yes.
Film. And for me, it's very important that everyone loves to trash Karan Johar, but the opening statement of the opening dialogue of that entire story, and it's important that the first story is the openly queer story, where he's not funny, he's not effeminate, he's nothing wrong with that, nothing wrong with that caricature, but it goes beyond the caricature. It goes beyond the caricature, and he's angry, and he's allowed to be angry, And in the first scene, he goes and hits his father, and he says in Hindi, "Main chakka nahi hu, main homosexual hu." That I'm not a eunuch in using a derogatory term. I'm homosexual. Do you even understand what that means? And for me, it's important that it's not a film that was seen very widely, but I think for the purpose of record, it's important that a mainstream Bollywood film coming from a mainstream production house, distributed by mainstream distributors, could do that. And people trashed it, saying, "Oh, you're showing a gay man as somebody who's violent and who does violence against his father, and so on and so forth. He's a husband stealer who goes and steals the boss's husband and so on." I'm like, for God's sake, let's.
Yes, Mukul, no, I do agree with you, because if you'd understand, in way back, I think in the 1980s, there's this movie called Cruising that was shown. And Al Pacino was acting in that, and that was when the community in San Francisco was up in arms. They're saying that you're showing gay men as murderers, you're showing them as violent, like how you said, and there was a lot of hue and cry over that. But that I think opened up a lot of stuff in the sense that a mainstream actor like Al Pacino, a main production house, showing a movie like that, and it did help. It did help a lot.
Yeah. So meaning, let's stop portraying ourselves as only victims or only sad people, only depressed and suicidal, and so on, or only good people. So we're allowed to be angry. We're allowed to be all of those. We're allowed to be as messed up as anybody else.
And we're also allowed to laugh at ourselves, I hope.
And we love to laugh at ourselves. And yeah, so I mean, I think that, that context of making those films is very important. Now, this has opened up a Pandora's box, and we're absolutely at the end of the time, to wind up. There's another comment about Lakshmi Bomb, which I don't think we can take up, but I'll read it out anyway. The biggest problem is we still have, as far as the portrayal of the queer community goes to mainstream media and stereotyping. A recent example has been the Akshay Kumar star Lakshmi Bomb, which became Lakshmi. Apart from the requirement of injection of humor element here and there, yeah, it's rubbish. I mean, that, I don't even need to see that film to trash it and so on. And
it is actually from the Tamil film Kanchana, I think, and where I think the effeminate boys after Kanchana became very popular. In fact, the effeminate boys in the area were called out as Kanchanas, and if you remember that, it's actually from a Tamil film.
Yeah. So I mean, I also feel that we are at a certain point in history where I think Akshay Kumar is to the current government what Dilip Kumar was to Nehru's government, where Dilip Kumar was the modernizer and Akshay Kumar is the poster boy of everything that he sells sanitary napkins, he does this, he does he's in pretty much every film now. So I mean, yeah, finally, what is it? I mean, I feel that art, culture making, academics is all a late byproduct of capitalism anyway. So those are the guys putting in the money, and we are the guys trying to make the best of it. And the interesting part is that the establishment finally needs validation, from historians, from academics, and so on. So yeah, but they want it on their terms. So that is where the fight is. But anyway, I mean, any closing remarks, because it's time to wrap now.
Yes. On an end note, I would like to say, we should all watch the documentary called Disclosure on Netflix. I think many of the questions that were raised here will get answered.
Yes, it's a wonderful documentary. Yes, I've seen it.
Disclosure.
Yes, it's a fantastic piece of work.
Yes.
And from my end, there are some exceptional films which never saw the light of day. And one I'd like to mention is Amol Palekar's The Quest. There were two versions of it. One was called The Tongue. One is called Tongue, that's the Marathi version, and one was called Quest. And if I remember, I think it was shown in either 2006 at a screening in Bombay or 2016. I don't quite remember the years too well. And probably in some foreign film festivals. It never saw the light of day. It was an exceptional film. And the only thing that exists is probably this 8-minute clip that you see on YouTube. And I want perhaps Dialogues will show it one day.
Yeah, I mean, there's also what is called India's first queer film made in 1973. Unfortunately, I'm blacking out on the title now. Maybe Anindo can remind me of that. Produced by
Badnaam Basti.
Yes.
On a short story by Kamleshwar, which was considered missing for all these years, but surfaced in a German archive and was
German archive, yes.
And again, something that is very, very remarkable. But anyway, I mean, I feel the discussion is only just beginning, but time to wrap up. And maybe
such a pity, Mukul, such a pity. In fact, the flow was coming just towards the end.
Yes.
But I'm glad it came, and thank you for being such a wonderful moderator, for easing us up.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. And sometimes when you're in therapy sessions, the therapist leaves you mid-thought, saying, carry that thought and go home. We'll meet next time, and so on.
We will carry that thought. Don't worry about it, Mukul. It's a pleasure talking to you.
Thank you both.
And thanks to Dialogues for doing this and organizing this.
Thank you, Anindo. Handing it over back to you. Thanks a lot.
Thank you. I mean, it's so interesting that so many threads were kind of teased out of this conversation, and I always feel it's like like Mukul was saying, a lot of the radical thoughts comes out of these private moments where we have the leisure, where we have the freedom to explore them without having the burden of, feeling the burden of having to produce something immediately. And I think the nurturing spaces, however, whatever they may be, somebody's drawing rooms or spaces that say, a space that I have personally been a witness to when I have been in Guwahati in Shankara's space, or the conversations that both that we have, Mukul, and they kind of really spur us to continue. In fact, one of the triggers for us, for me personally, when we were thinking about this, is this whole idea, and we really do not know enough that what is the kind of thinking, or what are the sort of challenges that cities, say like Indore or Kotem, or you know you know in Shilchar, for example. What is the kind of thinking? We are in conversations with some activists, and films are one medium, little magazines are one medium, and these have been mediums. Not, I mean, they are not newfound mediums. These mediums have been in existence as part of activism, as part of movements, right, for a long time. And so, yeah, so that is one thing. And in fact, this is a news from 2007, which I remember. I mean, it had really got me thinking. This was a news of students from a particular college in the Changanaseri in area in the Kottayam district in Kerala, who had made a short film on homosexuality, and the college had rusticated them. The college had sort of the students faced action, and I mean the way that the college found out, and then this film, interestingly made by these students, was a silent film. We have had it was a silent film, and the way that the college found out is because this film was submitted to a local film festival, and and then the college found out, and it was these students were sort of like, which what happened to those students after that, after this incident? I mean, what was their take? Of course, they defended their right to make this film and everything else, but then life moves on, and where are they now? What is the thinking? And if they have moved on to become filmmakers or programmers, what are the kind of conversations that goes ahead and moves ahead? Um, so great. Thank you very much. Thank you to Mukul, to Shankar, to Rajshri, to actually leave us with loads of thinking, and for us to be able to continue this conversation in multiple spaces. That's the imagination I would like to leave this session with. Thank you very, very much.